spoken before. He is absolutely exceptional. He's done something. He is exceptional. He's done something exceptional. So he has ADHD, and he's founded and runs London Met Police's ADHD Workplace Support Group. It's the largest workplace support group in the country, and it has 600 police officers in it, and it is now catalysing groups across into other Met Police. Only one Met Police, other police forces across the country, and I believe in total numbering around 1,000 individuals in them. Now, the other thing about being the police is because of the failure in education, we see a lot of people, and we have a talk specifically talking to it about the pipeline from education into crime by author of a book of the same name, and it's just been published. We have massive problems of people falling out of education into crime. We know that 40% of people in youth offending institutions have ADHD. We have a number of saying that 25% of people in prisons have ADHD, although you're going to be hearing later from ADHD Liberty, a prisons-focused ADHD charity, that they think that number is much, much higher. So the other thing Daley and his Met Police colleagues do is meet a lot of ADHD people and try to point out. So he's going to talk to that as well. He is waiting in the wings. So without further ado, I'm going to bring him in. Hello, Daley.
Hello, Emmy. How are you doing?
Yeah, great. Great to see you.
And you. Tanya was brilliant, wasn't she? Absolutely fantastic. I talk a lot about reasonable adjustments and stuff within the workplace. So hearing her speaking was absolutely amazing. And thank you for having us, and thank you for everything that ADHD UK does. I think your website and certainly the guide around diagnosis and right to choose is probably the most shared link that we give out, because it's very, very informative. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And obviously we are in the business of trying to make that a completely pointless page, because you shouldn't need to do it, right? You should have a good local ADHD service that you can go to reliably, not like here where I sit today, where I can't even join the waitlist, or in Oxfordshire where people, the GPs, because they don't have support for annual reviews, are about to cliff drop all their patients who have ADHD medication. As soon as you hit your annual point, you're going to be medication is going to be taken as an option, going to be removed from you. And obviously what we're telling people is, look at right to choose and move so that you're being supported, but it has to be outside of your area. Right to choose was invented to erase the postcode lottery. It was to say you can see other parts of the NHS regardless of where you are. But thank you for talking to that. And actually that does remind me, someone put into the chat, and I did a good job of pinning it. So question to Henry: would he be advocating for ADHD more publicly? I do not know how I could do it more publicly, just saying, but like many people are really struggling. Done news into I do not feel enough is being done. I can tell you, like, I do every single, regardless if it's like the tiniest blog to the biggest BBC news show. We do them all, and every single thing we're invited to do, we do it on purpose because we want to make change. We also work with organisations, particularly news, to do research to prove a point where we're seeing an issue. We will go out and do research, and actually thank you to everyone who does that research, because we mostly do it online, particularly on Facebook. The research itself is done on our site, which is promoted on Facebook, because those become numbers which are then used to prove a point where we're talking about people struggling to get medication, when we're talking about waitlist times in different areas, like when we're talking about being dropped off a cliff between CAMS and adult services, where we know that lots of children get dropped for 2 years. Like, it's not a story unless we can do two things, which is show some numbers that prove it's a bigger problem than just one person talking. And actually, talking one person talking, we also do need one person talking. They want to talk to a case study who hasn't talked to another news service before, often, or particularly not on that story. And so those people who aren't saying, yeah, I'm up for talking, it's a big deal. Do it. And it really genuinely is. We'll find that some stories won't happen because they don't have a case for it. They don't have a case study. Often it's local. So just this week we were doing one for the Surrey area, talking about issues around medication and CAMS. But so it is, yeah. So honestly, we're doing everything we possibly can think of to do. If you see other things, let me know. Right. Daley, I thought I ruthlessly stole some of your time, of which I should be outrageously putting. Well, unfortunately, he's literally someone who could arrest me. So, like, I should really play nice. You've got slides.
Yeah, are they present? I think I've clicked the sharing link. They
will, and there they are. I'm going to put you and I to one side. So I'm going to hand over to Daley. He is absolutely incredible. So not only has he found the Metropolitan Police, the largest, he both founded it and runs it. This is a big deal, so I'm really looking forward to hearing what he's got to say. Over to you.
Thank you, Henry. Hello, everybody. Happy ADHD Awareness Month. Good morning tomorrow, Australia. Hopefully some of you are joining us. As Henry said, I am DC Daley Jones, and I'm a detective in the Metropolitan Police. And when Henry, so I had no idea that we were the country's largest ADHD workforce group until me and Henry were talking about the presentation I was going to do. And I talked about the numbers we had, and Henry said it. And I think Henry probably attests to the fact I was quite shocked. It's
I attest to this fact. We're happy to be corrected in the chat too. So if you know of a bigger one, do. But I don't know one even close. And obviously we do talk to those groups. So,
if anyone pops up in the chat, I'll fight them because I want that title now. But anyway, just a little bit about me. First of all, I joined the police back in 2007, and that's me looking vaguely fresh-faced there with hair and dreams. It was a bit of a culture shock. I'm from a small town called Hemel Hempstead, which is, at the time, wasn't particularly diverse. So it was a real culture shock for me, meeting people from different cultures and the like. But it shaped the person I am now, and hopefully it's shaped the way that I treat people as well. I've actually spent the majority of my career working in safeguarding, so that's anything from sort of child abuse to domestic abuse and things like that. My job now is I currently review and audit public protection reports in the Met, and that I'll come back to that later because that does give me a bit of an insight around some of the sort of challenges. Forgive me, I just realised this next bit's slightly on the wonk. ADHD. Outside of work, I love history. I did a degree in history at university. I probably like history a little bit too much. I'm in a Civil War reenactment group. That's me and my gear there. And I'm a big fan of collecting weird and wonderful football shirts with my brother. And it started because we didn't know what to buy each other. And it's sort of sparked a bit of a tradition, so much so the BBC actually wrote an article about it once. I think it was a very ADHD thing to do. Me and my brother are both diagnosed ADHD, with the hereditary link in it, doesn't shock me at all. I'm immensely proud of him and his journey through neurodivergence. My own personal journey to getting diagnosed. I was seeking counselling way back in 2014 after the breakup of a relationship. And if anyone here watching has ever been to counselling at all, you think you're going to go in and talk about one subject. And what actually happens is you talk about everything. And it was as I was there, sat there talking about everything, and certainly some of the sort of challenges I have around my emotional dysregulation, organisational skills, challenges at school, university, and in work, that the counsellor turned around to me and said, "Has anyone ever told you you've probably got ADHD?" That was a real light bulb moment. It meant a lot to me. But because I've got ADHD, I procrastinated and didn't do anything with that information. I actually left policing back in 2017. I had a job opportunity to go and do something else, and it went quite badly wrong. And one of the theories I have about ADHD, obviously it being present, it's hereditary, it's always there, is that often the traits of the condition and some of maybe the more challenging traits of the condition can be quite well managed if you're in a sort of stable role. But when I left policing and the sort of structure and the sort of knowledge I had of doing that into something different, I really, really struggled. It's also fair to say that employer wasn't particularly inclusive. I'll say no more. I was eventually got around to getting diagnosed via the Right to Choose scheme, and I probably went on Henry's website on ADHD UK to get it. We've combined ADHD at the age of 36. I'm 40 now. I know it's incredibly hard to believe with my Hollywood good looks. It made a lot of sense to me, my ADHD diagnosis. Obviously, I'd already been told. But what I found is I kept meeting people who are really creative, really good at doing things with their hands, really, really good at sort of artists and drawers. And I've got none of those things at all. These things are effectively useless. So it was a great relief to be diagnosed with dyspraxia a year later. It makes complete sense to me. As a police officer, I have to do officer safety training every year. You know, I'm more a desk jockey these days. Desk jockey, not disc jockey. I want to make that quite clear. You know, my initials are DJ. Anyway, ADHD. If an officer safety trainer is trying to demonstrate like a handcuff technique or some sort of restraint technique in front of me, I cannot mirror what they are doing. So I have to go and stand behind them. If they don't know what I'm doing, or if I've not explained it, that gets very, very confusing for them. Long time before I got anywhere near an ADHD diagnosis, I was medicated for anxiety. I still take anxiety medication now. I talk about that because I think it's, you know, it does not something that bothers me particularly, and I, you know, see it as my job to try and break down stigmas around mental health. Henry's mentioned ADHD Liberty, and I know Sarah's going to be coming to talk about their work. I'm a trustee of their charity, and I take medication for my ADHD as well. I take Advance, so had the same fun as a lot of people did around the sort of recent shortages. I know they've not been resolved. I know for our membership that caused an incredible amount of stress, and yeah, it was not been a fun time. So what happened, and this is sort of explaining how we came to sort of set up an ADHD support group, is after I was diagnosed, I went and spoke to my sergeant, my detective sergeant, about it, a lovely lady called Sarah. I can't speak highly enough of Sarah. She's just a wonderful, kind, compassionate human being. The challenge was, though, that she had no knowledge about neurodiversity at all. And there wasn't a lot of information as to sort of where I could get support within work. Now, one of the first conversations I had was with occupational health. And they said to me, and we had a conversation, and they turned around and said, what reasonable adjustments would you like? Now, I won't tell you what my exact response was because it involves a swear word that begins with F. But it was along the lines of, you tell me. I haven't got a clue. I'm 36 years old. I've lived my life this way. And yeah, I've just sort of been muddling on through. Could you tell me what reasonable adjustments that exist? No one had a list of sort of things that were available. So yeah, I was absolutely clueless. I was directed to the Met's Autism Support Group. Now they are wonderful. They've been around a little bit longer than we have. Brilliant people, and to this day they do incredible advocacy work for the autistic membership and the autistic community. But I sat in their sort of meetings and talking to people, and it didn't resonate with me. Autism, of course, there's lots of overlap in the neurodivergent conditions. We know that they don't fit into neat little boxes, but what was being talked about and the sort of adjustments and this sort of thing did not make any sense to me. So I left a little bit sort of disappointed. As I said before, I could not find any resources within our sort of intranet system or anything like that. But what I did quickly realize is I kept finding and speaking to other people that are in a very similar boat to me. So ADHD, obviously, spark of, you know, intuition and impulsivity. We just sort of said, well, we'll make our own support group. And back in February 2022, me and my colleague Alex, who deserves a lot of credit because he is the creative one, I am the doer, we created the ADHD Alliance. Yeah, and very, very quickly what we realized was that there wasn't really anything like us. So these very crude pictures here are from our very first meetings that we had. And I've actually got a little bit of a funny story around this first one. So we hosted a coffee morning there. You see on the right of your screen, Scotland Yard. Pretty cool place to host a coffee morning to try and actually sort of, you know, get some people along, join our group. And I was so focused on this going well and being good that I used to always take my medication in the morning before leaving for work. So got ready, had my coffee and stuff, got in the car and was just pulling off the driveway where I thought to myself, you've not taken your medication. Ran back inside, took my medication, drove off. Coffee morning went really, really well. Did a little presentation. It's fair to say I felt brilliant, absolutely brilliant, probably a bit too brilliant. Got to about lunchtime and I started to not feel so good. Couldn't really work it out. Thought I might have eaten something a bit dodgy. Resulted in me starting to get quite cold and shivery. I decided to leave work slightly early, and by the time I got home, I could sort of barely walk. It then dawned on me I had taken my medication, and I'd gone jumped from 60 milligrams of my medication to 120 milligrams of my medication. When I eventually got around to speaking to my doctor said to me, if you told us this at the time, we would have probably sent you to hospital. I was fine, other than some very achy kidneys, but it did lead to a purchase of one of these. It's not going to happen again because I've got my little windows and I can see. If in doubt, don't take your medication daily. So we started to recruit, and what we found was sort of the following, really. We found that a lot of people come to our group had quite poor mental health. And the reason I mentioned my anxiety medication and the fact I have anxiety earlier on is because we found an incredibly large amount of people that were coming to our group had previously been diagnosed with depression or anxiety. There was incredible fear of stigma around telling anyone at work about their ADHD. I think this is a societal issue. It's nothing really to do with policing. I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding. Henry was talking earlier on about the media work he does, and I can attest to the fact that Henry does a lot. But the problem is, you will get one negative story about something like ADHD or one misconception by a celebrity, and it will unfortunately travel considerably further than people like Henry or some of the other experts out there. And that's the battle we're facing on a daily basis. ADHD is a fad. You can catch ADHD by taking too much sugar. These are all things I'm sure you guys here have all heard before. And also, it was certainly fair to say, it was prevalent in my early years in policing that it was often seen as an excuse for bad behaviour. I think that's still very much the case now in certain parts of society. I wish I knew now what I knew. I wish I knew then what I knew now. But there is still this massive fear of stigma. Now, part of that fear is driven by some genuine cases of misunderstanding. Officers who had come forward and said that they had ADHD or had been diagnosed were immediately stopped from driving. Now, what the DVLA legislation, DVLA is our driving standards authority over my friends in Australia there, says that you should only really stop driving if your ADHD medication affects you. There's also officers restricted from doing their normal duties, like things like carrying taser, but with no real substance behind that. It was because of a lack of understanding and people just making knee-jerk risk decisions. Now, I'd be the first to admit that if someone takes a brand new medication or starts a new treatment plan, there should be maybe a period, but not a blanket, just do it automatically. And that came from misunderstanding, I believe. No one knew how to get diagnosed, which is funny, actually, because when I spoke to my GP way back when and told him that I'd like a right to choose diagnosis, his exact words were, "What's that? I'll call you back, let me go and Google it," and came back and said, "Oh, actually, that's legitimate." So if that's a GP, you can imagine what it's like in policing, and the amount of people I still meet who are still on waiting lists for 3 to 5 years. And we go, hang on a minute, have you seen ADHD UK's website about page about right to choose? Oh my God, I can get diagnosed considerably quicker. What's a reasonable adjustment? I hear that from managers. We've heard that from managers and lots of people, staff and police officers. There seems to be a lack of understanding of what the Equalities Act is. And that's a concern, obviously, because the Equalities Act is what protects us from discrimination. And it very clearly says that, people with conditions like ADHD and the other neurodivergent conditions should be afforded reasonable adjustments, diagnosis or no diagnosis. The amount of times I've had to point that out to people in policing is quite scary. Another thing we've found as well is that a lot of people get pushed down a performance management pathway. People who have come forward and said, I have ADHD, I need to be diagnosed, and at no point were they actually afforded any reasonable adjustments at all. And they're pushed down this pathway, when what often happens is, in good scenarios, and funny enough, I had a conversation with a manager today about this, about a colleague that was having a struggle, is that when they realize that there are reasonable adjustments and things that can be done to just aid people in the workplace, we've had amazing success stories of that person's performance magically being transformed. And as sort of Tanya was saying, a lot of these adjustments are actually quite minor little things. This is also true of promotion and job interviews in policing, people not being aware of the adjustments that they could have. So I'll give you an example. In policing, to get promoted, you need to do certainly as a sergeant inspector, a multiple choice law exam. It's awful. It's genuinely awful, especially for someone who's an overthinker. The only way I was able to pass that exam was by having a break in the middle of it. Literally did half the exam online. It went away. I went, had an hour's break, got my focus back, and was able to then continue. And that's the only reason I passed the exam. Again, there's so many people who are unaware of these adjustments. And also often what we find is people who are not afforded adjustments because they cannot prove their diagnosis. I cannot think of any single other protected characteristic where you have to prove your protected characteristic other than disability and neurodivergence. Challenging work environments. It's fair to say a lot of the police estate was not built with neurodivergence in mind. Open plan offices, crowded spaces, terrible lighting. Often something that people have to find as well. And another thing, and I will allude to this a bit more, is problematic language. Now, my team at work are currently doing a piece of work around victim blaming language that is used that puts an emphasis of blame on the victim. Well, I also see quite a lot of language around neurodiversity and disability in general, which is problematic at best, discriminatory at worst. And I'll talk a little bit about a survey we ran with our membership recently. The biggest discovery, though, and I'm a massive Freddie Mercury fan, so any opportunity to get him into a presentation, here we are, was that neurodivergent people in policing and indeed the wider emergency services are absolutely rife. They are legion. They are everywhere. I have an interview for a new role. What accommodations can I ask for? How do I get diagnosed? I think I have ADHD. I'm trying to support one of my staff members with ADHD. These are some of the inquiries we get on a daily basis. And we couldn't believe the amount of people that we were coming across who are neurodivergent within our job. I'll move on to that a little bit more in a minute. I always like to use this slide around some of the things that a lot of people don't know about ADHD. And this is certainly very true around the training that we've done and the awareness sessions that we've run. Now, obviously, you've got the three things there at the top of the iceberg, which most people know about. The one I always point out to people here in particular is, first of all, the self-esteem. For 36 years of my life, I genuinely believed I was stupid, lazy, and incapable of doing what other people were doing. At university, my housemate was doing the same course. A piece of coursework would come in. We'd both go and get all the books, and he would be able to sit there and just work on it. Whereas I would sit there and my brain would kick in and say, you've got 2 weeks to do this, Daley. Why do you need to do it now? 2 weeks go by, and there's me running down the road to the history department with my essay on a floppy disk. Shows how long ago it was, trying to get it in because I've done it so last minute. It has led to some pretty bad low self-esteem issues. And that is something I've seen with the people we supported as well. And the other one I'm going to point out, certainly the biggest lesson for me, was the emotional reactiveness of people with ADHD. And it's very true for me. I go from 0 to 60 at the drop of a hat. What's frustrating for people, I've got them ready for an argument, is I also go from 60 to 0 again just as quickly. Certainly understanding that, and then when we think about how that applies to people we might meet, is a massive lesson. Certainly in my personal relationships, understanding that side of things, and the rejective sensitive dysphoria as well. The fact that I read or hear something and I will perceive it critically. My good lady wife, who is the most patient human being on planet Earth, will say something innocuous like, the dishwasher didn't go on last night, and I hear, you didn't put the dishwasher on last night. In a professional sense, that has been an absolute nightmare for me, and learning about that has been an absolute game changer. And again, this sort of awareness sort of talk situation around this sort of thing has massive repercussions in policing. Oh, is this video going to play? It might play. This is a video I always like to show. Fingers crossed it will play. It's the best version, I think, of what I think ADHD looks like. I'm also conscious that it's got very dark in this room, so I'm just going to put a light on if this will play for us.
It started raining in the pool and I immediately thought, what a beautiful example of ADHD. You give me a task and the task is that leaf. All right, focus on the leaf, not the dots. Just the leaf. Just the leaf. Just the leaf. Why is it taking you so long to complete that task? Well, because there's dots all around my little task that are constantly pulling my attention and I don't have any control over that. Can you just watch the leaf?
The reason I like this video is because it works both for the people we support within the workplace, but also the people who are out there we meet on a daily basis on the street who might have ADHD. So a workplace and scenario example here is that leaf is a case file that I have to work on. I have ADHD. The idea of doing paperwork is not my idea of a fun time. I have been asked to do it. So that's my leaf. I'm focusing on the leaf, but I'm sat in an open plan office. The phone is ringing. Emails are going off. My personal phone is there. Someone's playing a radio. The police radio has turned up. There's a TV on for some strange reason. They are the raindrops. I'm not concentrating on that leaf at all. Taking it out to the street. If it was me who's the witness of a car crash, I'm still on a busy high street and a police officer is trying to talk to me about what I've seen. Again, that police radio, if that's turned up, oh, that sounds like an interesting call. Cars passing, music blaring from a local bar. I'm not focused on what is going on. This is why reasonable adjustments come in. And reasonable adjustments for that person on the street might be turning the police radio down and speaking to the person in a slightly quieter place. And this is why when I tell you later on about mandatory training with policing, these little changes and how big a difference they make, it makes all the stranger that, you know, it's not always the case around training. Sorry, I was jumping ahead of myself slightly there. I always include a slide about ADHD in women and girls because one of the things we found running a group is the amount of women who've been completely missed down that sort of neurodivergent pathway, especially around ADHD. I think stereotypically because it doesn't present as obviously as it does in men and boys. I'm told the ratio of diagnosis is 1 to 3, and you know, without that external hyperactivity, ADHD is often completely mistaken for hormones, anxiety, and mood disorders and learning disabilities. One of the other very interesting things, and that we have had a lot of people come for support from us around this, is ADHD and the menopause. It's fair to say, there you go, changes in hormones during the menopause can exacerbate the traits of ADHD in women. It's so relevant that we actually have got a range of talks coming up for ADHD Awareness Month. We've already started, and one of them is literally going to be about ADHD and the menopause from a lovely inspector from Derbyshire called Claire, because it's massive and it's something people should know a lot more about. Now, why are there so many people in policing and emergency services work with ADHD? Well, here's a few little sort of examples of why and the traits of ADHD. Thrill seeking. We are out there seeking dopamine, however it might be. I can't think of many other jobs better equipped to give you that thrill than emergency services work. Blatting around in police cars or ambulances, for me it was always the 24 hours and on the pace clock, you know, the amount of time I had to deal with someone in custody for a big case, that was what gave me my thrill. The ability to change roles. I know so many people with ADHD outside of policing who have had about 25 jobs. I've had 25 jobs within policing. It's very good for that. Structure as well. Special interests. I know that's obviously often more an autistic trait, but you know, as I said, things don't fit into neat boxes, and policing is definitely a career where you can have special interests. And then I think you've got that compassion and that desire to help others very much comes from often the challenges that we faced ourselves. A strong sense of justice in there as well, ideally suited. Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why you see so many neurodivergent people in emergency services work. Yeah, there you go. Love of the chase. I think Tanya mentioned it when she earlier on. We're trying to get away from the challenges and the negatives. I did briefly mention some earlier on, but these are some of the strengths, I think. The ability to see the world differently, the ability to make quick decisions, hypervigilance, problem solving. Certainly one true for me, an endless, boundless amount of enthusiasm, relating to the people we meet, because we do meet a lot of neurodivergent people. And it's fair to say if we support people with ADHD, they can be incredible assets to the team. And this is something I'm trying to get the people who I work for to fully understand and embrace, because we should be actively seeking out neurodivergent people. So any idea of how many neurodivergent people and people with ADHD there are in policing? Unfortunately not, no, because we don't record that information. It's often recorded in recruiting, but then it's discarded. And in performance management and employment tribunals, it just gets put under disability. And I think we're missing a bit of a trick here, because I can't sit here and tell you how many neurodivergent people there are in policing. I genuinely believe it's considerably higher than what the average would be in the general public, but I can only say that anecdotally. Henry's talked about the amount of members we have, and it certainly has been quite meteoric as a rise. I meet a lot of neurodivergent people on a daily basis, and I say a lot of them are undiagnosed and a lot of them are unwilling to come forward. I genuinely believe there is incredibly large amounts of neurodivergent and ADHD people in policing. I did mention that I would be talking a little bit about the people that we meet. So the statistic that's often quoted is that currently in prison in UK, 25% of the people in prison have ADHD. However, as Sarah will obviously point out later on, and much to my belief, that figure is probably a low estimate. But even if we were to say that that was the figure, 1 in 4, that's huge. Most people I've spoken to would put it at 60% and higher. But there's evidence here that suggests that ADHD is linked to an early increase in early age criminality. I know Neil Alexander Pass, and we'll talk about that when he's talking about his book. Certainly an increased likelihood of reoffending, an increased link to aggressive incidents. I talked about that emotional dysregulation earlier on, up to 8 times more prevalent. And then this is an obvious one. I talked about anxiety and depression earlier on, a significant association with suicide and self-harm. That's the sort of offender side. I said earlier on that my job and the work I do is mostly around safeguarding and auditing. And recently we've been doing an audit around child exploitation cases. I cannot begin to tell you the amount of children who I have seen in reports who are being exploited in London who are ADHD and neurodivergent. We're people pleasers. We like to please. We love the thrill. We love, thrill seeking. I think there's a multitude of reasons. And here's some quotes from a study that was recently published in February by the Centre for Social Justice, and it's called Criminal Exploitation, Modern Slavery by Another Name. And it's very much pointing out that things like learning disabilities and neurodiversity are a big factor. There you go. Young people with some form of neurodiversity can find it harder to navigate relationships, understanding social cues and communication, recognizing worrying behavior by others, and identifying risk. And certainly that identifying risk point is something I see, this complete willingness to ignore obvious risks. And that is what can get young people into an incredibly large amount of trouble. So I've talked a little bit about this already, but why do people with ADHD get into trouble? Well, thrill seeking. Now, there's plenty of nice legal ways where we can go out and seek dopamine and a thrill. Unfortunately, there's lots of nice criminal ways as well. A need for structure. Now, it doesn't surprise me that there's this notion of the school to prison pipeline. I think a lot of people with ADHD will massively struggle when they leave the structure and discipline of a school system. The rates of people who have been excluded from school getting into trouble with the law is quite incredible. That need for structure. A strong sense of justice. Well, I mentioned that one earlier on, didn't I? Actually, I mentioned all of these ones earlier on. What an interesting juxtaposition. What I mean with this, though, is that if I don't get the justice in the way that I see it, and I feel I've been wronged, I will seek my own form of justice. And again, that will get people into trouble. poor impulse control. Yep, that ability to sort of say no, or that ability to want that thing and take it. Dysregulated emotions, people pleasing, and special interests. And I think this is particularly true around autism and stuff that's online. I was doing a talk for my dear colleagues at Counterterrorism Wales, and the person speaking after me was talking, who is a professor that works with offenders, was talking about how there are so many people with autism that are falling down this path of special interests around right-wing related material. It's not that they have any political views in it, but they just find themselves, getting sucked into it. And the more information they find, algorithms and things like Facebook and Twitter and that sort of thing, it can really sort of grab hold of them and lead them down bad paths. I always think it's worth pointing out at this point that I'm definitely not saying that ADHD is going to get you into trouble. However, the way I like to think about it is it's the socio-economic lottery. Now, I am sat here before you, a detective constable in the Metropolitan Police. I grew up pretty much afforded all of the luxuries of a secure family home, constant education, and even though I had my struggles, a stable time. For people from less affluent backgrounds who have a far more dysregulated and disrupted childhood and upbringing, for children in care, it's the traits of ADHD that if you had all those other factors in, that can lead people down the wrong path. And I think the statistical information proves that. But I always get someone saying, are you saying that everyone with ADHD is a criminal? Absolutely not. But that's just to the point I am trying to make there. So what can we do to support those in custody? Well, a little bit of a sort of prompt here. I was lucky enough to have co-authored a guide with some wonderful people from a group called Neurodiversity. They are a group of people who are really interested in the legal sector and making the legal sector more friendly for neurodivergent people. Now, when I talk about a lack of training around ADHD and neurodiversity within policing, unfortunately, that's also true for the rest of the criminal justice system, probation and the courts. And sometimes a lot of people's needs aren't met. And the reason this guide came into being is that we kept hearing stories of people with ADHD who'd been come into custody and they weren't having their needs met. And this booklet is literally designed to be a resource available in custody for someone with ADHD, diagnosed or underdiagnosed, to pick it up, have a bit more of a better understanding of ADHD, but also understand what their legal rights are. And that's particularly important when it comes to reasonable adjustments and appropriate adults. Now, remember earlier on I was talking about my sergeant's exam and how having a break made all the difference. You think of your classic police interview scenario with intense questioning, often very difficult subjects, the fact that there's going to be a lot of anxiety, going on because of the crime in question. I'd certainly want to have a break every now and again. Little things like that can make a world of difference. Also, how we put information across to people, potentially being able to break it down into slightly more manageable chunks, that kind of thing. Yeah, this is the sort of thing that policing should know about. But also people should know to be able to potentially advocate for themselves. Because if these things aren't afforded the person with ADHD and they were asked for, well, potentially you've got a miscarriage of justice on your hands there. And that is what we want to avoid, because believe it or not, what I want is a fair and equitable criminal justice system that benefits everybody. Just a bit of a big up to Sarah. She's going to be talking later on. I just urge you to stay around. She is the founder of ADHD Liberty. ADHD Liberty have been doing a lot of work in trying to get screening into police stations. When I first met Sarah, she pointed out the amount of people in prison with ADHD. And I sort of said, yeah, but what we kind of need to do is capture these people, certainly the undiagnosed, prior to them getting to prison. So that's why ADHD Liberty has worked on ADHD screening pilots. There has been a very successful one within the City of London. The figures of people likely to have ADHD from that pilot are around the 63% mark. The 2 probation screening pilots have also been taking place recently, and that's hitting a rate of about 85%. So again, that 25% figure starts to get a bit more distant now, doesn't it? So this is the problem, and I'm using my favorite Star Wars meme here. I do a lot of training around neurodiversity, within policing. But it's not mandatory. And that terrifies me, because I've already told you that there's a lot of people that work for the police who are neurodivergent, and a lot of people that we're coming into contact with who are neurodivergent. And this causes a tremendous amount of problems, both internally and externally. If I could sit down with the commissioner right now of the Met, I'd say the one thing that we need is mandatory awareness around neurodiversity, because it will be a benefit to our staff and it'll be a benefit to the people we meet. So one of the biggest achievements of the ADHD Alliance has been trying to fill that knowledge gap. We've probably done over hundreds of hours now of neurodiversity awareness training sessions around the Met. I could not begin to tell you. You name a command, you name a type of police within the Met, we have probably delivered to them. But beyond that, we've also delivered to people outside of policing. I had the pleasure to present at the Disability in Policing Conference both last year and this year. Heathrow's Disability Network, again, how we treat people. National Appropriate Adult Network, important for them because they are often the people that we need to be protecting these people in custody. Home Office Police Powers Unit, the PCS Union, the Royal College of Paramedics, and Bounce Back, who are a brilliant charity who do a lot of youth diversion work around, in the Met and Met custodies. They're meeting young people and trying to put things in place to divert them away from criminality. I mentioned earlier on, didn't I, problematic language around neurodiversity. So we decided to run a study for my support group. It's only been running since August. And unfortunately, these examples are real anonymous examples that people have given around problematic language that they hear around neurodiversity. Now, this is one I've read on 1,000 different police reports. Suffers from. Who are we to say that that person suffers from their condition? We could just say they have ADHD. We could just say they are autistic. Yep, that was a viral quote from a supervisor. This one, I'm sure people watching have all heard. We're all a little bit ADHD. We're all a little bit autistic. I think people are trying to be empathetic, but doing a terrible job of it because it diminishes the experience that we have. You don't look neurodiverse. Supervisor used the term apparent diagnosis. And again, this goes back to that stigma, doesn't it, about ADHD not existing. This is probably the worst one. Stop throwing a tantrum when the person was having an autistic meltdown. And again, this is why this training is so important. Now, this isn't me dissing policing, because I think a lot of these stigmas and these things exist in society. So one of the biggest achievements that the ADHD Alliance has had, I mentioned earlier on the lack of guidance out there. This is a list of all of the different guidance documents that we have created that are accessible for other police officers. I won't go through them all now because I've just had a clock of the time and I'm sure you've got some questions. I'm lucky enough to be able to represent the ADHD Alliance in a few national forums. I'm a proud committee member of the National Disabled Police Association with the Disabled Police Association is one of the only associations that's recognised by the National Police Chiefs Council. I also get to sit on a neurodiversity working group with the NPCC, and I sit on the Met's neurodiversity steering group as well to try and get some of these changes put in place. We've engaged with learning and development to try and include some of these lessons within leadership programs. We recently managed to get a pilot of trainee ADHD coaches to come and speak to some of our members for free, give their time for free. And me and my group have attended hundreds of different welfare events across the Met and nationally, just sort of spreading that message about ADHD awareness. We have an online support group accessible for people within the policing. That's every other Thursday. It is quite possibly the most beautiful space I've ever existed in. Just people helping people, and the amount I've learned from my peers in particular is more than I've ever learned from any document or any lecture, because the lived experience of our membership has been absolutely everything. We're running some talks for ADHD Awareness Month, and I'm actually quite lucky that the Met have actually decided to promote them on the national site. On the right, there's a blog I wrote about ADHD and why it's important we know more in policing, and also they posted our blog and I'll link to the speakers that we've got. I'm going to be a bit quicker. We've got a myriad of speakers from internally and externally. If anyone's interested, unfortunately, is only available and open to police officers or people who work for the police. I'll leave some details at the end if anyone wants to get in contact about that. And as Henry sort of said, from very small beginnings, we now have over 650 members in the Met, and we have over 1,000 members nationwide. And our goal down the long run is to continue to recruit national ambassadors to come and sort of set up their own satellite networks and continue to grow. We also have got a national site and hoping to get that working properly so we can actually share some of our guides and documents. It's also worth pointing out that we've never had access to any funding, not a single penny. The roller banner behind my colleague's head there that says ADHD Alliance on it, we had to buy ourselves. So yeah, it's quite remarkable that we managed to do what we've done. Just want to talk about a few inspirations here as well. This guy is called Detective Superintendent Dion Brown. He's in the Metropolitan Police. He co-authored the guide that you see there on stop and search around autism. Now that guide is available to anyone, and it is, even though it's based on autism, and I think sometimes there is a bit of an autistic bias around guidance and awareness, a lot of what is in it is very relevant to people with ADHD. He's also set up an autism alert card scheme. Again, that's something I would personally like to see expanded to other people, people with ADHD. And he is also behind an ADHD screening pilot in the Met, which is also sort of taken off. So he's a bit of an inspiration to me. This guy is David Breakspear. Again, I recommend you follow some of these people online. David basically has had a life coming in and inside and out of prison. He is one of these people that is a testament to how you can turn your life around when you've got a diagnosis and you understand your neurodivergence. He now works for the charity Revolving Doors and is heavily involved in prison reform. And after being failed by the education system, he's going to soon be doing a master's degree at Buckinghamshire New University. Revolving Doors are a charity that support people leaving prison. And finally, Carl did work in the Met with me, is now working for a company called Crease Puddle. It's fair to say that Carl was one of the people that had pushed the ADHD Alliance forward. We've done a lot of presentations together. He raises a lot of money for charity. I think he's just come down from Mount Kilimanjaro. But yeah, he's a wonderful human being. I'm very lucky to have met him as a neurodiverse advocate. And Caroline, who runs this company, Crease Puddle, who do a lot of training around neurodiversity. She was formerly a police officer herself and set up Crease Puddle. And we're lucky that they actually came and did some training for the Met. It wasn't mandatory training, though. And yeah, as great as it was, and it was great training, we need it to be mandatory. So that's something me and the Met steering group are looking at. And I just want to take an opportunity to celebrate all of the volunteers that work with me and our group. I hope some of them are watching here today, because no one gets much time to do this work. I have a full-time job as well as running this group, and that's also the case of a lot of our ambassadors and volunteers. And it's fair to say a lot of the charitable sector and support groups for any industry are volunteers. So my opportunity to say thank you for the work you do, because none of these things would ever happen without you. Just a very quick idle boast. As I said earlier on, I talked at the Disability in Policing Conference. Well, the 2024 edition was Monday and Tuesday this week, and I was very lucky to have been awarded the Disability Advocate of the Year in Policing. So no idle boast there. It was nice to get recognition. The person presenting me with the award there is Caroline on the left, but the girl on the right of the picture there is called Tilly Lockie, who is called the Bionic Girl. She has robotic arms, so she's the coolest person I've ever met in my entire life. And I believe that slide on the screen, because, well, I can circulate that information later on, because I realise the time has very quickly sped up. But if anyone would like to, policing would like to get in contact with us, there's our policing email address there to come along to, join in. And if anyone would like to contact me personally, that is my email address there. And I'm now going to stop talking and wonder if anyone has any questions at all.
You have so many
There we
questions.
go.
That was amazing. Congrats on the award.
Oh.
I didn't know about this. Like, absolutely.
It was. I think it was. Well, it was literally Monday night. Yeah. So very recent.
Yeah, spectacular. Yeah, big congrats. Right, you've got a lot of questions, so this is going to be quick fire round because we don't have much time. We've got a wonderful Dr. Samantha Hugh queued up, ready to roll. So, yeah, we are running to time. I learned the lesson from prior conference. you have to be very firm on this ADHD rabble that turn up and have terrible time management, run by my rabble who also has terrible time management. So
cats herding cats.
Right, yeah, we are doing this quick fire. Right, from Claire, it's on globaladhd.com. She's put in the questions. Our NHS Trust as Neurodiversity Support Group, we're struggling to get the basic information across regarding reasonable adjustments and access work process. Do you have any advice for us?
Reasonable adjustments and access to work process. Yeah, I do actually, because we wrote a guide for police officers explaining what the access to work program and process is, which I'm happy to share and be more than willing to share, Claire. I'm sure we can get my email address out to you. I don't know quite how we do that, but yes.
If you didn't get it, or email hello@adhduk.co.uk and we will forward it to I presume you're giving us the okay for that. This is not one to you, but Elaine, these sessions are fantastic. I can't stay awake for 24 hours. Don't worry, we don't expect you to. The recordings stay stay on. We'll put them up on YouTube as we have for 2023 and 2022, where they will live ad infinitum. How do they contact other groups? Someone wants to know, like, how do you have a contact for the police, ADHD, or neurodiversity group in York? How do we get there? Like, how does someone go about contacting that kind of group?
Well, see, a lot of the groups will be internal working groups. So if you work within the policing, I'd be able to give find out someone who works within there, because we have representation in every single force. In terms of people externally, I don't think it's quite that simple, obviously, because these are we're mostly talking about internal groups. But yeah, again, we could. I'm sure I could put you into contact with someone in Yorkshire if anyone's not a problem.
Okay, so. Well, that's very kind to do the direct contact. Otherwise, I think the point is these are internal groups, and you then need to talk to. Actually, I was going to say HR. Is that how it works?
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, we have got to be careful with the information we give out, obviously. But yeah, these are internal groups.
But essentially, you need to go to the management structure within the police and go ask. And if you're internal, that would be much easier. And for external, then different. This is a good question. They're all good questions. I don't want you to think that we value some questions less than others. Just saying, although we value this one a bit more. With the benefit of hindsight, what would your top 3 tips for setting up an ADHD workplace group? Someone read the title. Good job.
Excellent. Because I've got ADHD, we just did. There was no time to sit down and actually have a plan. People started to, so what kind of happened, we were meant to be just a Met group, and then what we found is that there wasn't anything that existed like us nationwide. So people said, can we come along, can we join in? And we just said yes, which is great. And I don't regret it in a way, because we wouldn't have expanded as quickly as we did, but have a plan, get help. Early doors, it was just me and Alex, and even now we don't have enough help, but definitely get help. And if you can find a senior sponsor, someone who is sympathetic to your needs and the wants of your tribe, your support group, that means everything. Because unfortunately, in a ranking organisation like the police, it still is the case that I am at the bottom tier of the ladder, and sometimes people feel they don't have to listen to me. So that was 3 tips, wasn't it, Henry? I think I just about managed that one.
No, honestly, was not counting. I was reading new questions. I thought that was quite interesting, though, what you jumped to, which I think is an example of your situation, is that you were like, jump to, how do we set this up? You need an advocate. This is what it was, the sort of the real fundamentals. And I do think that sort of internal advocate to help you do it, someone in a leadership position ideally, can make a huge difference in terms of helping.
I think it's also role models
have impact.
Yeah, I think it's also role models as well, Henry, because I talked about that stigma and fear about ADHD and neurodiverse conditions. And I'm lucky that I have met a few now senior officers who are willing to talk about their ADHD, but that means everything. That means the world. Look, you know, I was recently at a talk, and I think Chief Superintendent Sarah Johnson, I think she leads the race action plan nationally, and she was doing a presentation about something else, and she started talking about her ADHD and how it benefits her at work. And I'm sitting there going, wow, a senior officer is talking not just about neurodiversity, but talking about the benefits of her neurodiversity. And that again, that meant everything to me. And yeah, just more of that, please.
It's a big deal, people coming out and talking about it. And obviously when celebrities come out, you normally just get this constant of, oh, they're just jumping on the bandwagon. It's just like, and you're like, you know, it's a big deal. Like, there's no benefit from coming out. Like, if you think people give us like nice presents, that's not how it works. Like, we do not. Right, we had a few, you know, in the chat. Whenever you're still on fast rounds, we've got just a few minutes. What are your thoughts on the police and neurodiversity, in particular, professional standards? The struggles of ADHD in policing, from my personal perception, do not work. Like, I lost my job with GMP due to an emotional dysregulation incident a few years ago.
That's a fantastic question, and I wasn't obviously able to cover everything within my presentation, but we have engaged with professional standard units, certainly the Met's one, about the fact that you need to have neurodiversity awareness training, because if you don't understand that things like undiagnosed ADHD can potentially get people into trouble, then you're not taking that into mitigation. So excellent question. It's something we have raised, and I've raised at a national level as well.
Okay, on screen, Claire Preston-Davis, I agree with mandatory training. If you don't understand ADHD, we don't understand our public. Also, hi.
Yes, Claire is the one who's going to be doing the talk about ADHD and menopause for my group, and she's wonderful. And another example of a fantastic police officer with ADHD. So hi, Claire.
ADHD Voice UK have been putting in a lot of good comments, and if they want to get in touch, do you go through mentioning another quick thing, hello@adhduk.co.uk. Question for Daley: how do you feel about ADHD and ASD being put on an individual's PNC reports as a warning signal?
Right, there's a difference here. On PNC, so if anyone doesn't know, PNC is the Police National Computer. It's the national database.
Great, I did not know, so that's good.
Yeah, it's a national database. So yeah. But very quickly, there's two different markers you can have. You can have a warning signal, which is things like weapons, or, you know, we often see neurodivergent conditions stuck on there as ailments. I think that's problematic. Having on there as an information marker, however, I think that is good, because you want to be able to, I'd like to know that someone's potentially got ADHD or autism. Now, I don't think it's because I would know that I might have to have some consideration for reasonable adjustments, but that's nothing if you don't have the training to back it up.
Okay, last question, and then we do sadly have to say goodbye. I've managed to get rid of the question by mistake. Someone was saying, talking about the problems in school. Like, how do you suggest we protect young people in school?
Well, very, very quickly, I've talked about mandatory neurodiversity awareness training in police. It's not mandatory for all teachers. So I think that's a good starting point. Understanding that people learn differently, and, you know, trying our best to not kick people out of mainstream schooling, or giving them the specialist help they need to keep them within education and give them the best chance and start at life. I hope that's a good answer.
That's great. Thank you. That was amazing. Dave, congrats on your award. Very well deserved. Like, it is a testament to
thank you very much.
Years of work, and doing something extremely important and special. We've got to move on, sadly, so I need to say goodbye to you. But thank you so much for being a part of this, for sharing your knowledge and what you've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. All the best. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, Daley. Thank you very much indeed.